Welcome back to the long-term series Hall of Community Change. My guests today, Annalise Jennings, Maryann Coconut, Ernest Madua and Margie Barnes. I'll start with yourself, Annalise. Welcome back.
Thank you, David. Wonderful to be here.
And Maryann, what a pleasure to be participating in a program again with you.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
And Ernest Madua. Ernest, welcome to you as well.
Yes, thanks very much, Dave. Pleasure to be here.
And Margie Barnes, it's a pleasure to have you here as well.
Thank you, David. I'm pleased to be invited today.
Annalise, let me start with yourself. As usual for our listeners, a general background of the series itself over the last year, I believe, and also this wonderful opening of the Civic Centre today. What a wonderful event that must be.
It's been wonderful here, David, and I'm reminded of the many milestones that Napranum has achieved over the past 18 months in particular, and each time we've done a broadcast, we've spoken about each of those wonderful milestones, and today another one, the opening of the Civic Centre, the opening of the library, which has been named after Maryann, which is it's just been so wonderful to be here and to participate in all of that, and just to listen and hear the energy of the people here and the dancers, the speakers. It's just been a really, really wonderful afternoon.
What do you think, if anything, the series itself has accomplished in tracking the benchmarks in the last year? An awful lot has happened, hasn't it? What would you say the other major items on that itinerary that anybody listening back to this legacy of broadcast could pick out, could see?
Well, I know when Maryann and I both started to engage in this series, our commitment was to celebrate good news stories. And I believe that this broadcast has very much brought the success of Napranum forward, the spirit of the people. And so there's been some of the individual events around the opening of the supermarket, refurbishing of the Oval, new street lights, speed bumps, a community that has transformed, street signs, a beautiful new sign, new roads. We've spoken about so many celebrations along the way, but I believe that what has really stood out is the spirit and the commitment of the people of Napranum, who have really taken this philosophy of creating economic enterprise alongside the spiritual well-being of the people, and they've taken that concept and they've really owned it and taken it forward, and I really believe that that's the highlight of these broadcasts.
Is there an aesthetic change, Annalise, between when you first discovered Napranum in circa 2009 and now, in terms of the layout of what you see when you first approach Napranum? Is that aesthetic different now?
Very much so. It was in September 2011 that I was invited, actually by Margie, to come and visit the community. And what I noticed back then was certainly I noticed a beautiful community in terms of its natural beauty, the water, the people, the culture, the listening to people talking in their language and the singing. I remember all of those beautiful things that I experienced. But I also noticed that there wasn't a lot of infrastructure. I noticed the blue tarp over the top of the council chambers. I noticed that there wasn't a shop, that there wasn't a school. I noticed people's conversations where I remember one young woman saying to me, Annalise, it's hopeless, nothing's ever going to change around here. And that was a young woman with two little children who came along to one of my sessions. And so I remember some of those things as well. And what I see now is a community that's really buzzing with a massive increase in infrastructure, with people who are really participating actively. One council worker said to me a few months ago, he said, Annalise, it seems as though at least one person in every family is now working. And so the transformation is really very significant, and it's evidenced by the amount of infrastructure that I see around me.
Annalise, thank you very much. Turn to you, Maryann. You have been, of course, honoured with the library. What an amazing event this is. How do you feel about the way that Napranum looks, Maryann? It must be a fascinating process to you to take this journey with Annalise and all of your colleagues.
Yes, it is. I'm so pleased to see the change and what's happening. We celebrate together with the energy around us.
Annalise just mentioned there that there's so many more people working, and if you're in the United Kingdom or the United States, we would start talking about those who wish to work, those who wish not to work or stay in some sort of social security system. What is the fact that everybody is working in Napranum say about Napranum and the culture? It must be a very, very good sign.
It is because I believe there's a change in people's mind, the way they think, the way they look. With having those workshops with Annalise, people were able to talk about their feelings. It was part of what's happening too, about lives being developed. So we talk a lot about infrastructure, but we talk about people's personal feelings and how their lives are changed when you see things like that happening in the community. Because of course, communities are made of people. People are the community and what's happening going forward and the process, what's happening in the community.
Can you paint me a picture, Maryann, of the Civic Centre and the library compared to what would have been there perhaps 50 or 60 years ago? It must be a complete transformation, but how do these buildings look to you? How do you see these buildings as they stand there?
Well, I can just think about the time when this place was a school and there was classrooms and teachers and children here. Then suddenly it was like gone from the people of Napranum. We've got a nice view here looking towards the water. And so that's what I picture in my mind. And after seeing the old building standing with no movement in it after the school closed down, it makes you think that the area is alive again, not as a school, but as a civic center for the community.
So the way you describe that, Maryann, is not so much about the building itself, the construction itself. You're talking about more the energy and the movement of people within those buildings which define them.
Yes, that's correct.
Let me turn to, thank you, Maryann. Let me turn to Ernest. Ernest, you're a deputy mayor of the community. What are your thoughts today? What a wonderful day this is for you.
Yeah, no, well, firstly, in regards to my role, yeah, I've moved on from that role. I'm now a ranger coordinator for working for my community or under the council. But also being the MC today for the ceremony, it was a great honor, and I think today has made it's been a significant highlight, for change in this community of ours, Napranum. So, just going off what Anna Maryann said, like this used to be our school. I used to run around here when I was a little kid, and to see the transformation today after a few years since this building was sort of deserted, if you could say that, and that was because of the education department seeing that due to poor attendance or also or not enough numbers to keep the school running is probably the reason why they had to close the school. Yeah, but I mean, you know, we all move on from everything, and this, you know, today is you know, is sort of brings new meaning to life for us as community people. So we brought this school facility back to life again, and now it serves you know, an equally more you know, opportunity, you know, to as a council office, you know, to run the community, you know, and we're very grateful of the change, and you know, and not just here at this building, but you know, all of the community, you know, all around the community, you know, with infrastructure and development, more homes, you know, to accommodate our community members. You know, the wait list is still a fair bit, but you know, having the premier here today, you know, I think gave us that assurance that you know this Napranum is pretty much in the spotlight when it comes to, you know, infrastructure and development. So housing is almost you would say probably 60% completed. You know, like we've still got a fair way to go. I think having the right people, you know, in these leading roles in community, you know, helps.
Have you always lived there? Is this
Yeah,
your
this is
so you've seen huge changes. So were you in the Napranum area as a young boy?
yep, yep. I'm still a young kid. I'm not that old. Napranum is I'm a my great grandparents. They're actually traditional owners. You know, they were chiefs. He was chief of this area. So we're actually traditional owners, landowners of the Weipa Napranum areas. So that's our connection to land. And you know, in the beginning, we were born up north there's the island. We lived up at top at Cape York, but then we moved to Weipa in the early '80s, and you know, to realize that you know we were traditional owners of the land and been here ever since. So we have a very deep, purposeful meaning of, you know, a reason for being here in community.
Can you just describe to me what the duties are of a ranger coordinator? I think that's fascinating for our listeners.
Yeah, it's all about conservation land management. So we do monitoring out on country. Within the Napranum Shire, we have a dogget lease, which is a boundary that looks after all the Trishalona group's country. And as part of the, I think it was the Aboriginal Land Act, I think from memory, or somewhere along the governance part, it came into play in terms of looking after country, and it also was to do with land being handed back to traditional owners. So through the council, we've established the Land and Sea Ranger program to look after country. So we do a lot with you know, with control fire burns, and we do fencing, and we do monitor wildlife, and there's also a turtle and feral pig management that we do. So yeah, it's a pretty heavy role, but it's enjoyable because uh, my office is pretty much out there, out on country, and not sitting behind the desk unless I'm doing reports.
Let me just, Margie, before I come to you, forgive me, just 1 minute. Maryann, when
Yes.
Ernest there talks about land and sea, now that really chimes with me. It says a lot about how you see that land. What's behind that description of land and sea? Because that says a lot about your landscape, doesn't it? That may not be necessarily evident in a community that's inland in Australia.
It means a lot to us caring for the land. We want to make sure that the people and visitors that come here have the respect for land too, and for the traditional owners of the land. It's important that we make sure that we look after the land, and making sure that everybody respects what is expected of them.
Are there any traditional stories or folklore that talk about the combination of the land and sea? Is that something that's talked about in old traditions, the fact that you do have land and sea and not just land on its own, Maryann?
Yes, we do have traditional stories. That's the reason why we have to tell it to our young people and to the children, because everything in the story connects to the land, the rivers, the trees, even the skies. It's important that we connect traditional stories with the land, not about young people learning in the school, but it's about educating them about country and traditional stories.
Let me turn to you. Thank you, Maryann. Let me turn to you, Margie. You were the CEO, and there's must be so much experience that you've gained and wisdom that you've gained from being in this community. It must be an amazing experience for you, particularly today.
Yes, it's been an enjoyable event for me today to see the opening, to see the building refurbished, and a celebration today. During my time here, there was, a lot of sentiment and expressions to see something happening with this area, and it's just really great to be part of it and to see a lot of the community supportive of this. And it's a real community meeting point now, I think, going forward.
I think it's really important, Margie, just to define the difference between a CEO and a mayor or an administrator in a community like Napranum. Have had that question come up in a couple of emails, because it may be differently set up if you were in, say, the United States or another country. But there, what's the precise role of a CEO versus a mayor or a councillor?
Okay, well, with your council, they're an elected body, and there's normally, like anywhere, rules around eligibility to become a councillor or a mayor. So they're elected by the people of the community. The role of the CEO is an employment role that you've been engaged to come and work for the council and manage the administration and the operations, but also to work with the council in developing the messages and the aspirations from the council themselves.
So when you initially reviewed the 10-year visionary plan with Annalise Jennings, how did you see that? How did you feel that would progress over the years, Margie? Was it something that was very different, very unique?
Well, when I review back, I've been fortunate enough since I've finished my role as CEO here to be working in another role very close by. And Napranum community and the council remain part of the new business that I work for. So I've still had that connection, and I've been able to witness firsthand a lot of the events and a lot of the milestones. And it's really great to see as each one is achieved, that there's another one that's ticked off the list that the people themselves created. So I feel very privileged to be able to still witness it and be close by.
Do you have any thoughts, or could you perhaps paint the next 10 years for Napranum in particular? I know that's a terribly difficult question, but how do you think that the next 10 years will be for Napranum moving forward?
I'd like to look back on a little bit in the past where there really did not seem to be a central hub for the community, and now that is developing. In the next 10 years, I just see it growing more and more and gaining more independence, and the people of Napranum just having real ownership of their community, not only in their community but within the region. Weipa is very close by, so within this Western Cape region, and I can just see lots more being achieved.
Can you just expand a bit on that central hub? What is the exact practicality of that? What does the central hub achieve in terms of of human performance, human relations infrastructure?
Well, most places do have central hubs like like a store, like a post office, like a library, like a meeting place. And a lot of that was not here. It had been in the past, but for one reason or another, it'd been closed down or stopped. So to create that hub back in the community where they've got those services within their own place quite often gives a great meeting place, for people to connect to, keep a lookout for one another, keep up with what's happening in the community. And if you don't have it in your community, when you do have it, you just take it for granted that you've got those common meeting places where day-to-day life takes you and connects with people. And I think by having that hub back in Napranum, it joins everyone together.
So, Margie, just one last question. What is the influence that perhaps will dissolve or disintegrate the hub? It's a fairly straightforward question, isn't it? Obviously, its influences from other places like Weipa, but what are the main items that would discourage the betterment or the ever growing establishment of a central hub in a place like Napranum?
I think there's a lot of positives here, so I don't like to look at it as disintegrating. I think it's here now, and the people have brought it together. So by the people continuing to take that ownership and sense of pride, I don't like to think that it would disintegrate. I think it would only grow more and more. They're getting, with that unity, the strength is there, and the creations and the aspirations will still continue to flow, and I'm sure everyone will work hard to bring more to the community.
Yeah, thank you, Margie. And Annalise, that's really interesting. I picked up on that central hub because that's, to me, is a real visual sign that Napranum is becoming once again its own self-encompassing, self-dedicating community. That is wonderful, isn't it, for a community like Napranum?
Well, it really is, because whole of community change is about creating that social fabric in community. And then from that social fabric and that bonding and that connection and that sense of belonging, yes, we can identify a number of opportunities around building business enterprise. But unless we've got that central hub, unless we've got that meeting place, that place where people can connect and come together, ideas often only last for a short time. And so I really do agree with Margie. We've got a beautiful blend of both here. We've got that business enterprise, we've got the growth in infrastructure, but we've also got the spiritual well-being and growth of the people, because this has always been about growing the community from the inside. And so I just can't imagine a time where this could possibly go backwards. I just don't believe that the people will allow that to happen.
Yes.
Keeping in mind also that what we did as a big part of this is that we identified the values of the community, and hundreds of people participated in that. And the number one value of this community is community ownership. And the other is community engagement, and the other is working together, the other is fairness. And so when service providers or government or anybody steps into this council chambers, the council will remind them, well, do we own this? Have you engaged us? Is it fair? Are we working together? And if the answer is no, then it's not fit for purpose. So that really is our starting point, the bringing together of values that really unite us. So yep. I believe there's only one way to go, and that's forward.
The Civic Centre then, Annalise, is a massive symbol, is it not, in that central hub?
It's a huge symbol because it was once the school, and as a school, the school is always a meeting place. The school is a representation of the social fabric of any community. The school was taken away from Napranum without community engagement, and so it left a real grief and a real hole and an upset in the people. And I really heard that loud and clear when I came here in 2011 and engaged people and asked them, what is in your heart and mind? What is it that you want to see going forward? And I remember that this dilapidated building, which looked like a bit of a wreck, really. The meeting place, this beautiful school, was just a wreck and a derelict building. So to see this now recreated as a civic centre, which is now a hub of the community, it's actually very it's very symbolic. Today's been a really important day in that regard.
I've got to ask you, Ernest, there, because you traditionally you welcome people to this country in your many ceremonies. It must be really important, isn't it, if you're welcoming people to this very different Napranum now that is just evolving so well. The way that you deliver that must change as well, doesn't it? It must be an exciting time for you.
Well, from a cultural perspective, like our community with the name of Napranum in language means meeting place. So therefore, like we've more or less, brought that to life, with recreating this civic center, where there's that opportunity for everyone to be included. We talk about social inclusion and that, and that's the way we're moving forward. And in the past, community does have that tendency of isolation, but when we look at infrastructure and development and everyone working together, the change that comes with it, the dynamic change, if I can say, it really re-influences and it reignites the thought process that our people, our indigenous community people more or less think, so the mindset has changed. It's sort of lifted it to for them to realize that there's a lot more than out there than just living in a community. And when we build community with the support of with the local government and that and the opportunities that comes with it, it's it can only mean well for us, and that's the meeting our aspirations, and the goals that we've set in place for with the the whole the 10-year whole of community change process. But it's after the 10 years, it's still not going to stop there. You know, our community can only strive for the betterment of the way we live and the opportunities, especially for the younger generations, because that's they're the core of continuing our lifestyle and the changes that comes with it, ahead of each of us after we pass on.
So that's discovering the internal perspective. How do you now transform that to make it appropriate and engaging with those who wish to visit Napranum as sightseers, as witnesses of this incredible transformation? How do you write a plan, or how do you market that to encourage people to come and visit?
Napranum is it's always a place of a destination place where everyone wants to travel that come see. So we do have multiple tourists that come in each year, and our public engagement that we make as part of a council and as part of my ranger role as well, we always make sure that we communicate with the outer world, if you can say that, and so that people can understand and appreciate, and see that a community, an indigenous community, can change. And it's always good to see and know that people really appreciate and good to hear good feedback from the public and from other respected communities. And the one thing about us, we've definitely set a precedence in terms of how a community can be, and by achieving the things that we've already achieved in the say the last 2 or 3 years, so and that's something that we can continue to thrive in, is ensuring that there's that good transparency of with amongst our peers and our communities, the region, from a local level, from a government level, from a state level. And when we have important people that comes up to visit Weipa, like today with the premier, honoring us with her, her visit here, it means a lot, from that level, because at least the government knows, that there is a community out there that's thriving and really pushing the boundaries and setting,
So let me just ask, Annalise, that's really important, isn't it? I mean, where does the public relations, where does that outreach become ignited to where you can start getting a witness or a reflection from outside communities, outside government agencies that can now start writing about Napranum themselves and provide a good reflection that comes back to the community itself in building that picture for those outside of the community?
Well, it's all part of the ripple effect, I believe. So that pebble in the pond has been cast with every member of the community really believing that change is possible. And so the language changes, the conversation changes, the whole perspective changes. And so as community people communicate with other communities, and with people outside, whether it's government service providers and so on, there's a new conversation, there's a new buzz. And as service providers who continue to look after the community, are part of that new conversation also. And so, the next evolution of whole of community change really is about looking at existing infrastructure and services that are owned by government and looking now at the transition to community. So, the conversation, the ripple effect continues. So that outside perspective is very much now a part of the reality here. People are watching.
Social media is something that's already exposed our community. I don't know if you want to go on YouTube, you'll find our Napranum song on YouTube, and have a look at it, mate. It'll open your eyes. And I'm the big fellow that's rapping in it.
So let me ask you, Maryann, Ernest there talked about Napranum's definition, of course, which is the meeting place. Can you just build on that, Maryann, because that is extremely significant, not just for people inside the community, but it's almost a sort of a call to action, isn't it, for people outside of the community and further afield to come and make it their own meeting place in the future. That's quite exciting, isn't it?
It is exciting. We're happy to have other people come into the community too, and meet and greet and hear from them what they feel, how their feelings are, and what they see in Napranum community. It's how the people see it, not just with looking around for the development or the change, but hearing what the people say, that their language have changed by understanding more and sharing the good news stories with not just the people of Napranum, but other people that comes in as visitors, government people, or any other agent that comes to work with the people in Napranum.
There's something extremely profound about that. Annalise, because Maryann talks about how we see it. I wonder, there's something behind that, not only for those who are in the community, but those from an external perspective who wish to join the community and celebrate with the community. It's about seeing, isn't it? It's not about just experience. It's seeing so much deeper into the souls of the community, into the human aspect of the community, and that wraps back around to what Ernest had talked about in sharing that in social media, which, like it or not, is incredibly important in our world today. But seeing it, Annalise, Maryann, that really has something very deep that's being stated there.
Well, one of the fundamentals of the making of community is welcoming the stranger. And so there's a number of perspectives there, because in every human being there's a gift. There's a potential that exists in all of us, whether we're from inside the community or whether we're strangers. And all of us collectively, I believe, are part of the tapestry of this new creation, this new social fabric that exists here in Napranum. And I really do believe that the people of Napranum are very gifted in that way in welcoming the stranger. And so this whole process has been about finding the gift that exists in all of us, and all of us then making a contribution and stepping forward. It's really been a huge collective song, if I can put it that way. We've all sung together.
Yep, singing the same tune.
Margie, can I ask you about that, welcoming the stranger? I mean, we're essentially talking about a type of outreach, public relations that actually comes from the souls of the community as a collective rather than one single department. Now, that in itself has got to be something that Napranum would have so much fun with in engaging the strangers. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's really a positive, because part of this process of bringing that gift out that each individual has, people want to engage and people want to speak and people want to share and have that sense of that they do have that value to add. And so when the people are speaking sort of from the heart and from the community, and you're welcoming that stranger in a business or in a social way, the people pick up on it and know that what is being said is what is meant, and they pick up on that feeling and what's important. And you hope then that everybody that's picking up on that stays true to it and deliver whatever they're here for in the same spirit.
Annalise, doesn't that mean in some ways a sort of a, how would I put it, a sort of a reciprocal swap of values between those who would like to come and engage in Napranum and those who are in Napranum? That is quite a spectacular way to exchange values and to create new ones, isn't it?
It is, and I believe that, now that Napranum has come, such a long way in such a very short space of time, I really believe those collective values are like a bit of a blueprint, a starting point. When we think about belonging, connectedness, caring for the whole, that's the essence of the whole strategy of the 10-year plan. And, those principles were underpinned by the values of community ownership, engagement and working together. And so any conversation, whether it's a stranger, a service provider who's working in the community, government, strategic partners, people who want to come in and create business joint ventures, the starting point for everybody when they sit around the strategy table is a conversation about values and beliefs, because these are the things that unite us. So we can be from anywhere in the world, but when we sit around this strategy table, it's about belonging, connectedness, and caring for the whole. So we really, I believe, we look for those strategic partners who are willing to come together in that philosophy, and then we can't go wrong. It's impossible to go wrong because we're all working in the same direction.
Maryann, can I ask you, Annalise has just talked about caring, collectiveness, caring for the whole. This takes us right back to what the Creator is all about. Are there traditional methods or traditional stories or ideas that talk about welcoming the stranger in those terms from the perspective of the Creator, the perspective of the universe, in the traditional stories of Napranum that you can remember?
Yes, it's always about unity. When people connect, feel that they are welcome. You're not a stranger, even if you're a stranger, because of the way people treat you and welcome you, where you feel the warmth of the friendship of the people. And I think I always talk about how people feel about each other, feel that warm feeling in them to welcome other people around them, even if they are strangers, to make them feel welcome in your community. Because it's always when you're a stranger and you go to another place that you feel alone. But when you are welcome and people greet you with a smile and a hug, you know that you are being welcomed by the people. You feel the warmth and the love of the people around you. And that's always been in a traditional way. When our people met, they'd sit around the fire, and if they've got fish or meat, they'll share it with everybody around the fire.
I'm just going to ask you there, Annalise. Amazingly, you've opened the Civic Centre today, Annalise, and I think in some ways with buildings, particularly if you're in mega cities, we tend to look at them as sort of inanimate objects. But in this respect, in the way that we're talking about the War Memorial, the supermarket, the Civic Centre, they're not really buildings, are they? They're living entities. They're people. Do you see what I mean there? Which is so important for Napranum.
Yes, absolutely. I do see what you mean. I didn't actually open the Civic Centre. I was here as part of the collective, and I felt very privileged to be here and to witness it. But whilst I didn't formally open it myself, I did feel that I was part of the community, and I felt really happy, and I felt the harmony and everything that Maryann talks about in welcoming the stranger and the hugs and the love. I've lost count how many hugs I've had today. So it's been a really warm and wonderful time. But you're right, David, it's not about the bricks and mortar. It's not about the physical building. This is the spirit of the people. And you could almost, be here in this centre without the walls and still feel the energy and the essence of what's really happened here today. The metaphoric meeting place, the language name, the definition of Napranum. That today is really symbolic of that.
David, just one thing to add with this. It's what the question you mentioned. It's all about healing. We're when we look at the War Memorial, there's a lot of history behind that. With the old people, Anna Maryan's dad and and mum, what they had gone through at that time when was that through World War II?
Yeah.
Yeah, during Second World War. So yeah, that's why that's come about, and as it's been a highlight because it's all about healing. Same as the school that's been transformed into now our council building. It's healing again. The shopping center, it's healing because these are these were always what the community had wished for. They want change. They want to move on with life. And have better opportunities, and and having infrastructures and things like this in place has really healed that process of of our community, and that's so it's all that's why it's also brought up a change in mentality as well. There's hope, and there's aspirations for better things, and it can't be done unless we've got good leaders in community, and but more importantly, respecting and acknowledging what their elders uh, want to see, because they've they've been there long enough to have suffered long enough to see that these things haven't come to life, and now that we have, we brought these things to life. It's ultimately given them that sense of healing and appreciation, and it's what we all felt today, with this ceremony today of the opening of the Civic Center. It's bringing, like I said before, it's bringing new meaning to life for us, and opportunities for the future. And
I'm incredibly moved by that, Ernest, especially when you talk about healing, because much of my time these days, while I'm back in England, is spent walking around incredibly old, beautiful cathedrals, and I feel people in the cathedrals and not the brick and mortar that Annalise talked about. And moreover, I feel not only in myself but in so many this time as being a time of healing. So let me just take that to Maryann. Would you agree with that, Maryann? Could this be these times that we're living through, whether it's a golden age or whatever it is it also a time of huge healing for all of us?
Yes, we feel that I personally feel that it's a time of healing, and when we see old buildings being renewed again, even having our own shop back in the community, it brings healing back, because in people's life, it is about living in comfort, with a comfortable home, with something that makes them feel comfortable in their own community, and not thinking that it's just meetings and words. It's about action, something being done, and you see it around you. Yes, it's all being done. It's all part of the plan, the 10-year plan, which we put to say community people living in unity by working together and having being on the same page to make those plans work for the people, not just for the people now, but for the future of the community and our younger generation.
Comfort. I've written down here, providing comfort for the stranger. That's really something, isn't it? I'm going to, as we come to the end of the program today, ask for final comments. So I'd like to start with yourself, Margie, if I may. Amazing conversation. We're talking about how we can transform strangers, how we can comfort them, how we can care for the whole, how these incredible buildings that have been created are actually energy and people.
It's just pleasing to be in the community and witnessing this and seeing so many people from within the community, within the neighbouring communities and within the other stakeholders joining in and there's a number of projects that have been met, and it just gives, it's been demonstrated today that there's a great sense of pride and unity with the people here, and from that you'll know that there'll be more achieved going forward.
Margie, thank you very much. And Ernest, your final thoughts for today and our discussion.
Well, the way I see it, for us here today, it's all about collective thinking. It's all about collective networking amongst our community organisations and having the support from our governments as well, and for them to understand and value and appreciate that we do mean business, when it comes to creating a better change for our community and having a more better sustainable future where we can have a sustainable revenue base that the community can have to create more employment, and provide a source of income to each families, and like I'm all for it. I represent my community. I wear many hats in my community because this is my home and there's nowhere else I'd be, and I'm here for my people and welcome everyone else that comes into my community.
Thank you for that, Ernest. And Maryann, I know this is a really important day for you, to have these magnificent buildings, people, as we call them, as we realize that they are. Your final thoughts, Maryann. It must be wonderful for you to be able to witness this transformation.
Yes, it is wonderful. It gives joy in our heart to know that everyone around us are happy with the opening, having people come together and celebrate together. It's part of this big celebration, thanking our Creator Spirit for being with us, putting our faith and trust in our Creator Spirit to be with us as we pray and hope for a better future.
Maryann, thank you so much. Well, Annalise, I guess we're living in amazing times, are we not? And what a incredible discussion to have on an incredible day. I mean, quite something, isn't it, to be here at this time and work with these incredibly beautiful people here. Great friends.
Absolutely. For me, it's always a privilege when I step back onto community land and I'm met with smiles, and I know so many people here now and I just feel really connected. I love it here. And I'm reminded that the people of Napranum are dream builders. And when you become a dream builder, there's simply no going back to an ordinary existence. And I remember also Ernest came along to the Young Adults Leadership and Capability Program that was part of the whole of community change process. And we had a fantastic celebration after that program, and the community came together in celebration, and that was kind of like the beginning of something new that was happening here. And we videotaped and pulled together a documentary of the night. And I remember Ernest saying into the camera, he said, keep an eye on us. Do you remember? He said, keep an eye on us because we're going forward. And I will never forget that statement, and absolutely true to that. Napranum is just achieving, moving forward, and this Civic Centre is another example of that intersection that exists between creating economic enterprise and spiritual well-being. So I say congratulations.
Thank you.
Maryann, your final thought, your final word, if you may, for our listeners. What's your final message, Maryann, on this wonderful day?
My final message would be another milestone has been achieved, and we still look forward for more achievements in life. not just with the community, but with the people, developing their lifestyle, make sure that people are healthy and working together to face tomorrow.
Maryann, thank you so much. Start with yourself, Margie Barnes. Margie, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here.
And to Ernest, Madua. Ernest, what a great conversation we've had. Thank you for your participation.
Anytime, yeah.
And Maryann, how lovely to talk to you again, and look forward to talking to you very soon.
Yes, it's a pleasure. Look forward to talking to you. Looking forward for the books.
So I hear. Another exciting event. And Annalise Jennings. Annalise, been a great discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. I've loved every moment of celebrating success. Thank you so much.
Whole of Community Change, the long-term series, and that completes our program today that did feature Annalise Jennings, Maryann, Coconut, Ernest, Madua and Margie Barnes. Do hope that you enjoyed this program as much as we. You can gain information on this and any other program in the series at the official website, davidgibbons.org. Meanwhile, wherever you are in this world, we'll wish you a good morning, good afternoon and good evening.